perhaps more than any other composers from Japan. The composers of Intelligent Systems, the in-party house that worked on the Paper Mario series, on the Fire Emblem series, has received not nearly enough credit for their work. I mean, I talked about credit and people not crediting Go Ichinose for some of the incredible work that he's done on Pokemon, but the work of the Cavaliers and Yuka Tsujioko at Intelligent Systems is simply criminal. It's criminal because they've not received almost any attention by name on the internet, and it's upsetting because a lot of what they do resonates with fans of their work and people completely outside of their work. I bring attention one video on the internet that has talked about one of the Cavaliers, specifically 8-Bit Music Theory did an analysis of Road Taken, what we're analyzing today. However, in that video, he failed to mention the composer's name, or rather did not do any research on who even wrote the piece. And I love the guy, and I think that the video that he made on it is great. I think that he doesn't have the quite the chops necessary in order to analyze the piece, because it uses some very complicated harmonic concepts. And I'm going to explain them in this video, but I actually really like that video by 8-Bit Music Theory, and I'm happy people are talking about it. I think a little bit of background is in order, because who I'm talking about are the Cavaliers of Intelligent Systems, who are Hiroki Morishita, and who we're talking about today, Mr. Takeru Kanazaki's great work on the Fire Emblem series as well. Now, both of these composers, Hiroki Morishita and Takeru Kanazaki, have been at Intelligent Systems for a long time. Not quite as long as, let's say, Yuka Tsujioko, who is like pretty much the mother of Intelligent Systems fantastic music. And we'll get to her, at the end. I want to say a couple things about her. But I think the excellence of Intelligent Systems music comes from the team that they have there. And it's very clear to me that they consult each other on harmony, and their musical language has a sort of homogenized a bit because they talk to each other and they learn from each other. And they're a great set of musicians who really want the best for these soundtracks. And they create a product that is just better than almost any other team could do. And, that's the power of having these legacy composers in charge and working on composition. So let's take a look at Road Taken. Here's the chord chart for it. And immediately, we should talk about function. Now, from a functional standpoint, this first phrase is progressive, right? We start from a tonic function chord, and then we move to another tonic function chord. It's rather stagnant immediately. And I mean, this is important because it isn't about the function. This first phrase is not about the function. We'll get to what it's about in a second. But coming up with two consecutive tonic function chords shows an ambivalence towards function, right? He doesn't care what the function of the chord is because listen to how pretty that is. Right? Obviously, there's something else going on here that's more important than the function, and that is this progression. We start out with a minor 1, and then we move to a borrowed 6 chord from a major key. Excuse my retardation here. That's a music joke if you get it. But yes, we go from a minor 1 to a minor 6. And what I'm doing when I'm playing it is I'm bringing attention to the major chord at the top of that minor 7 chord. Listen to how I do that. And by doing that, it really gives it quite a double tonic sound. And we can talk about double tonic sonorities later. We will. I actually already prepared a presentation on another song that actually has a little bit more double tonic stuff. But the composers of Japanese music understand the double tonic principle. And what's important here is not the root of the chord, right? The root of the chord isn't the important thing. It's the fact that we have a chord that starts out minor and then becomes major. Let me bring that out. Here's the minor 1 chord, and here's the minor 6 chord, right? So really we go from minor to major. That's the opening statement of the piece. And I usually call that isochronously shifting mode. And this seems like an overly complicated way to explain it, right? Isochronously shifting mode, that's way too smart of a term. Well, it's actually not. It's actually just as specific as it needs to be. So I'm going to break it down for you. In this sort of music, the important thing is the mode or scale, right? Mode is kind of a synonym for scale. There's a little bit of a distinction between the two, but basically the mode shifts at an equal interval of time, right? Like that's the important thing about this particular harmony. That the mode shifts at an equal interval of time. So we're going to actually kind of map what's going on here. We start out with Aeolian mode, which is a minor mode. And then we're going to shift to Ionian mode, right? And then back to Aeolian mode. And then to Phrygian mode. And he just kind of sits on it. Right? How do you analyze this contrasting of modes? Well, here's our mode chart. We can see that Ionian is pretty high on the list. And we can see that Aeolian and Phrygian are pretty low on the list. And that reflects in this graph, right? So we start out at Aeolian, and then we're going to get to this really bright sounding Ionian sonority, right? Isn't that just wonderful? That's what he's bringing attention to. And then we're going to go back. We're going to go back to Aeolian and feel how comfortable this sounds. So we go from this dark, comfy Aeolian sound to this bright, sort of piercing Ionian sound. And then back to a comfy Aeolian sound. Right? It feels so comfy after that Ionian. And then we go even a little bit darker. And then he brings it back to reality with this little thing. So that's this section right here. So he's doing this very nebulous contrasting of modes together, where the chord doesn't matter as much as just the sort of modal contrast, and you're listening to it and you're like, oh, that's a nice tonality, that's a nice tonality, that's a nice tonality, that's a nice tonality, that's a nice tonality. Like every single movement is just like beautiful and wonderful. Right? Your mind just kind of like doesn't look at all of the complexity and just hears a bunch of really pretty mode changes. But then we go back to Earth, because then we get... He's like, I'm going to pick a tonality. So he picks Aeolian as the tonality. And then we get this very classical 5/7 chord. We get 1 flat 6, 4, 5, right? That's just a descending thirds progression. It might as well be 50s rock. Right? And then the very Bach sounding cadence figure of... Right? That's important because in the next section, we're going to be in Aeolian. Look at this very, 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 very garden variety Aeolian progression of flat 6 to 1, right? Listen to how simple that is compared to the first section. It's 6/1, 6/1, 6/1, right? And then 4/5, which then starts over the progression because it's a cadence to half cadence. And then it goes 6/1, 6/1, 6/1, and then 4/5/1. So he just ends the phrase and he's like, okay, we're done. But he's not done, because here's more Aeolian harmony. I mean, this is a very, very specific type of Aeolian harmony called a Royal Road progression. Excuse my arrows not being covered, but there's 2 arrows there. Royal Road progressions are this very Japanese sounding, dainty little chord progression used in J-pop, right? That goes... And this progression is pretty standard. And then the second time, we get a little modification of the Royal Road progression, right? Because instead of a minor 5, he exchanges it with a major 5. So we get right? And that gives it much more closure. It's the same thing that he did on the first line at the end, where he used the 5/7. It just gives it a little bit more closure. So I'm going to play this whole B section and C section. It's like this. Listen to how comfy that is. It's so comfy. And I mean, comfy is the name of the game, right? This is a track that plays at points in Fire Emblem Fates. where it's very low energy. You're grinding, or, you know, there's a couple maps where it plays as well, but it mainly plays while you're grinding. And this sort of low energy, comfy sound helps to make the experience a more therapeutic, sort of meditative experience. And it's probably the reason why I spent like 300 hours playing Fire Emblem Fates, even though the game has its issues. I think it was the game I played the most on the 3DS. So that's crazy. But then what is this next section? Like, literally, what is this next section? So we have... Okay, we could say that that's dominant. I have no idea what context it's being used in. D flat? Okay, that doesn't sound very tonic. I might buy that that's predominant. Okay, I have no idea what we're doing now. That doesn't sound tonic function, okay. Are we just in the wrong key or something? But look at the A minor 7 sound predominant dominant. Right, and then it would resolve here. Right, so it goes like A minor 7, and then D7, and then it would resolve to G. Right, that's like a normal 2-5-1. So what is this section? It doesn't make any sense functionally. Well, this is the section that really doesn't make any sense, right? We have this F7 to D minor 7 to D flat major 7 to C minor 7 to C flat major 7 to B minor 7. You see, there's sort of a pattern. It goes minor 7 chord, major 7 chord, minor 7 chord, major 7 chord, minor 7 chord, and then there's another minor 7 chord that sort of breaks it up, right? Well, he's using this particular real sequence. And I'm going to play what's on the diagram here. There's some weird stuff going on here, but when I reached the A flat major chord at the bottom, did you feel like it was back to the beginning? If I didn't have this thing to look at, I would have no idea that I got back to the beginning on that A flat major chord. I would have absolutely zero indication that I was back in the home key. And that's the amazing thing about this progression. It is a real sequence. And as a real sequence, every single instance of the real sequence actually sounds identical and has the exact same interval content. The interesting thing going on here is that we have a chromatically descending bass line. And it's basically a series of flat 6/5s, right? Flat 6/5, flat 6/5, flat 6/5, flat 6/5, flat 6/5. Right? It's just a series of flat 6/5s. And they alternate major and minor. Well, I have sort of a different theory, and this is my conspiracy theory number 1 that I have. That the composers at Intelligent Systems understand this logic I'm about to present to you. Which is, so if you have an F major 7 chord, and you move down a half step to E major 7, it feels like a resolution. Right? Doesn't that feel like a resolution? And contrast that to the second one, which is an F major 7 down a half step to a minor 7 chord. Right? That feels like it could keep going. Right? Like you could just keep doing that. Right? It doesn't ever feel like it's resolved. Same with the next one. You could go from an F major 7 chord down a whole step to another major 7 chord. none of those are ever going to sound like a full resolution. Maybe a little bit resolved, but it doesn't feel like a full resolution. Like you couldn't end a piece of music. Or at least you could. You'd have to have a language where that's the most resolved sounding thing in the piece. Good luck with that. That's cool. But finally, let's look at this last one in the first line. You have an F major 7, and then you go here. It's very jarring, huh? If you add like extra extensions, then it's nice, right? But by itself, it's very jarring. And the reason why is it feels like a 1 chord, like a major 1 chord, moving to minor flat 7. And you hear this augmented second going on. It's just weird. It's just a bizarre sound. And it's pretty if you add a 9th. But that's because if you add a 9th, it disguises the augmented second. Like, I could just not even play the augmented second. And now it's not that bad. That's the thing about voice leading. Sometimes you can leave out notes for better voice leading or whatever. But I like it. I like it. I want to hear that augmented second. That's sexy. Now let's look at the second line. Let's say you started from a minor 7th chord. So let's say like you started from like F minor 7, for example. And then you move to a major 7 chord. Right? Like you couldn't end a piece of music there. It's pretty. It's awful pretty. Maybe you could end it here. Like that, but you couldn't end it here. Right? It feels like something needs to happen after that, right? So that one's not resolved. The next one, which is a minor 7 chord, and then consecutively moving down minor 7th chord, so... Right? It's never going to sound resolved. It's just going to feel like that could go on forever. And then we have a minor 7th chord moving down a whole step to a major 7 chord. And this to me sounds resolved. Because to me it sort of sounds like a 2 moving to 1. And I'm kind of cheating because by doing this, it feels like a 5 chord, like, right? So that's what I'm sort of hearing. I'm hearing like a 2. And then this is like anticipating the 1. Or rather, a retardation. Okay, the last one is also not very resolved, right? You have... Right, you could just keep doing that forever and it'll never feel resolved. So these rules, I just kind of made these up, and I'm sure that they didn't read this in a book anywhere, but these are principles of composition that do seem to guide the composition of Road Taken. So, I mean, here's like putting it on the chart, right? So we have this D minor 7th chord. And then we go down a half step to a major 7 chord, which is continuation, right? Right? And then we go from a major 7 chord down a half step to a minor 7th chord, which is continuation. And then we do the same movement over again. And then we move down a half step to a minor 7th chord from a minor 7th chord. and it's not resolved yet. And then we get the D7 chord, and that's our dominant chord, and then it resolves to G, right? And that's an interesting way to leave it. So that's that section. Those are like two ways to look at it, right? I recommend going back and listening to those examples again, get used to them, play them on the piano, kind of figure out that logic, right? But for the meantime, let's move on. So in that first section, I talked about how simple it was, right? Well, the B section comes back here, except it's harmonized differently. And in this case, it's harmonized with a sort of lament, but as you can see, it's functionally very similar to the B section above it. It looks somewhat similar. The only difference would be, we have some chords exchanged out, but at least it's all tonic and predominant, which is, not very progressive harmony. It's very comfy Aeolian harmony. That's the important thing. He's using this comfy Aeolian harmony that makes you just sit back and you can listen to it all day. It's just like pretty music. It's like wind chimes, they're usually Aeolian mode. I've heard some wacky wind chimes in my life. They're not all Aeolian mode, but that's a good way to, create a very comfy feel. See, people associate minor with sad and with evil, and the darker modes like Phrygian with like eroticism and violence and stuff like that. But it could also be sweet and comfy, and this is a perfect example of that. You get that cheesy little flat 6, flat 7, 1 at the end. Well, let's look at this bass line, because this is the important thing. Right, that's the contour of it. It goes down all the way to C, and then it comes back up, and then we get that D at the end, dropping down. It's like he had this idea to go down and back up, but he kind of gave up on it. Well, the second time he doesn't give up on it. Listen to this. Right? The second time he does do it, he goes all the way down, all the way back up. It's a mirror image. It's a palindrome, right? So we have cool bass line, and he achieves it by doing this lament progression, right? It's sort of like broken up, right? We have the 5/7 all the way at the end, and we have the first three chords at the beginning, and of course the second chord is the flat 7 chord is exchanged with a flat 3 6/4 chord, which is fun. That flat 3 6/4 chord is a common substitute for a flat 7 chord. I mean, if you really want to be technical here, you could say that the flat 3 6/4 chord is just a double suspension on the flat 7 chord. Here's the difference. Here's a flat 7 chord and here's a flat 3 chord. You can see it as just like a double suspension. They're both kind of major chords that can be in that position. And I have that on one of my diagrams. I say you can do flat 3 6/4. Ironically, I didn't put flat 7 in position 3, and I should have. Yeah, I'm going to need to make this chart even bigger. Well, whatever. So this section, which is also an Aeolian progression, the Royal Road progressions are back here, and they're pretty much identical to the way they were originally, except we have a little turnaround at the end. Let me actually play this whole Ionian section and sit back and relax and listen to the cozy harmony here. And that's sort of an odd turnaround, flat 6, flat 7. And that transitions back to the... So is there a rule of 3 in this piece? Well, we have isochronously shifting mode, and we have this reel sequence right here, this descending reel sequence. So we have... right, that isochronously shifting mode, and the reel sequence, the... And then all the rest of it is Aeolian harmony. It's cozy Aeolian harmony to fill in the gaps. And it's a lot of it. I mean, he really sits on this Aeolian harmony. It's so meditative. You know, Aeolian is such a dark and comfortable mode. He can sit on it. Right? And you can listen to that all day, which I did because I played Fire Emblem Fates for way too many hours. But that's really it for my analysis of Road Taken. However, don't go yet because we're still going to talk a little bit more about Intelligent Systems and their composers. So, Intelligent Systems is a very old division of Nintendo, and there's 2 pieces I want to play, right? There is ID Purpose, which is the other Cavaliers magnum opus, and there's a section of it that goes like this. Right? And that's actually identical. It's the same exact reel sequence as we saw in Road Taken. Now, what is the likelihood that 2 composers use the same exact reel sequence, who work at the same company, in the same place, in the same country, at the same time, in the same division? What is the likelihood of that happening? Probably pretty high, because these composers probably talk to each other. They probably talk to each other quite a lot. And I bet that they didn't even come up with it. Because now I'm going to play a much, 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 much older piece of music by Yuka Sugioka. And I have to say, that's sort of out there, isn't it? Well, that's Tiki's theme. And in that piece, there is seems to be an understanding of the principles that I just talked about with those descending major and minor seventh chords. Right? Those are all continuous, and then they go down a half step and do this resolution here. So I think Sugiyoko, even if she doesn't conceptualize it like I did in this video, she at least understands how to do this from a fundamental level. And I mean, notwithstanding that she does isochronously shifting mode. I could pull this one out. I'm going to do that song eventually. I promise to do that song eventually. It's Paper Mario. It's wonderful. But it's isochronously shifting mode. So all of these composers are doing the same thing. There's no way that Yuka Sugiyoko, being the mom of Intelligent Systems music, did not teach the two cavaliers how to do this stuff. It is required for her to maintain the quality of the music from these games. And I think that her contemporaries, the Cavaliers, Kanazaki and Morishita, have done an equally, if not like better job with this stuff than she did. So she's like the founder of it, and these composers have worked to keep her legacy alive and to develop some of the ideas that she had compositionally in her early career. And this is like conspiracy theory number 2. I don't actually know if they talk to each other about this stuff, but what's the likelihood that they didn't when they work at the same company and are all using the same harmonic devices? I mean, if I would like to see, personally, if there's a way that I could maybe interview these people. You'd have to spread the word and get in touch with these people, because I don't have the power to do that. But if you're interested in seeing a Yuka Sugiyoko interview or a Morishita interview or even a Kanazaki interview, I'd love to eventually have the honor to do that, like be able to do that. So that's it. I have a Ko-Fi. You could donate there, and that will help me make more of these videos and talk about even more complicated subjects. That we're not slowing down. We got more and more complex stuff going on. Just a little bit later. So take it easy and good evening.